to start sharing my own story, how I became a practitioner. My husband and we got married about 20 years ago. And when we first got married, I was still living in Lebanon. So we were told that I need to avoid getting pregnant, because if I get pregnant, that's going to be a problem for me going to the US at the time we were planning. So I didn't want to use birth control pill, so I asked, and I was told about the calendar rhythm method. And we start using it, and we used it for our first about 2 years of marriage, and it worked, supposedly. We didn't get pregnant. So then we tried to use it the other way around to get pregnant. We realized that the method doesn't really work, but we had an infertility problem. And for those of you who do not know what's the calendar rhythm method, it's basically a woman is told to count from the first day of her period up to 14 days and to consider herself fertile those 14 days. If she doesn't want to get pregnant, she just doesn't have intercourse with her husband for the first 2 weeks of the cycle. So we realized that the method wasn't really working. It was an infertility problem that we had. And we went to see fertility specialists in New York. In our journey of infertility, I don't think there was any moment that I still remember like that meeting with the fertility specialist. It was 10 minutes. I will never forget her words. We will make you babies in the lab. Like making sandwich in the kitchen. No compassion, no humanity, nothing. It was so painful. I remember we were going to do it. We were just desperate and we wanted to have children. So we went and heard about how in vitro fertilization is done. We had to attend a session at the fertility specialist clinic. I remember leaving the office crying, saying to a friend who was with me, I don't think I can have children this way. And I'm not judging anyone who did in vitro. Please, if you know anyone or if you yourself have gone that way, please don't consider me judging anyone. It's just, I couldn't. Hearing about the destruction of the embryos, freezing the embryos, all of that, I was like, no way, to have a child, all of these embryos will be destroyed. I just couldn't bear it. I came back home and I remember telling my husband, I'm not doing it. If you want to have children this way, you have to find another woman. It's not going to be me. I was like, no way. And we were left with no other option. Then my friend who was with me, she looked up alternatives to IVF. And she found out about St. Paul VI Institute for the Study of Human Reproduction, which you've always seen the paper that has the title and has this from the Institute. So I contacted the Institute and they told me that I need to start charting my cycles in order for Dr. Hildreth, the founder of the Creighton Model System, to be able to help me. So I started learning. The first step to learning the system is to attend an introductory session, which is a PowerPoint presentation. I remember that same night, waking up, sitting in my bed, saying to myself, I didn't come to the US just to be a chemistry teacher. I need to learn this and share it with others. I never thought I would be doing this. I never thought I would be sharing it in Lebanon, but God has a plan. And it's been 15 years for me since I had become a practitioner. I was a high school teacher, I quit teaching, and I became dedicated to doing this. And I go all around in the US, many states, to teach the Creighton model, to give talks to Maronite communities, to give classes to people who want to learn about it. So we've been trying to get this to Lebanon because we want people to know that there are other methods. Contraception methods, the calendar method, they're not the only ways to plan your families. There's a lot of people who just think this is the only option for them. We want people to know that there are options and it's time to find the freedom in their ability to effectively avoid or achieve a pregnancy. I do this because I know so many women, young adults, married women who struggle with many gynecological health issues like polycystic ovarian syndrome, PMS. PMS, just for those who are not familiar with it, it's a premenstrual syndrome. It's those symptoms that a lot of women, and I mean a lot of women, suffer from before their period begins. And we were told all our life, it's normal, it's fine. Every woman suffers with it. Well, Good news, the Creighton model and NaProTECHNOLOGY tells us that PMS can be a legitimate medical condition, and we will hear about that later. So for people who are struggling with PMS, irregular bleeding, severe menstrual cramps, acne, heavy periods, and they're told that the birth control pill or those artificial hormones are their best options, we're here to tell them NaProTECHNOLOGY offers them real solutions to all these problems. There is another approach, and that's why we're here today. A lot of couples these days are struggling with infertility. We get a lot of couples who come to us and they're told their infertility is unexplained. There is no reason why they can't get pregnant. And they're still wondering why. NaProTECHNOLOGY seeks to find the problem, treats the problem, and let the couple try to achieve a pregnancy naturally. And that's why it's time for couples to explore a more effective science than in vitro fertilization. It's time for couples to discover what they really need to know and what every woman has the right to know. Women can find freedom in their ability to use one system from puberty all the way to menopause, whether they get married and they build a family and they breastfeed and approach menopause, or whether they even struggle with infertility, whether they seek root with NaProTECHNOLOGY and successfully achieve pregnancy, or even they go a route of adoption, or even for women who are consecrated or religious sisters. I teach a religious sister in New York. And the reason why I teach them, not because they want to use it for family planning, but because they have gynecological problems and they don't want the birth control pill to be prescribed to them as the solution for their problem. NaProTECHNOLOGY offers real solutions to what they suffer from. And that's what a lot of people are looking forward to. The Creighton model system works by tracking biological markers in the woman's body, which we call it cervical fluid, cervical or cervical mucus. What you're seeing here is an example of a chart. What you see me holding is an example of a blank chart that is given to the woman. And this is a stamps packet that's given to her, and she's told how to chart her cycle. And this is an example of a chart. The first 8 days are her period. She charts them with red stamps. Then she has 5 days of dryness. And then she starts observing that cervical mucus, which is very essential in our work. And then after that, she observes the dryness again. What I want to bring your attention to is the levels of the hormones. Notice in black, we have the progesterone levels, the estrogen levels. When the estrogen levels are high, that's when the woman observes the cervical fluid. When the progesterone levels are high, the woman observes dryness. She doesn't observe that discharge. This is very essential because, as the dean and father mentioned, this is something scientific. This is scientifically based. It's not just you try. It's based on hormones that the woman's body produces. This is an example of a chart where the couple used it to get pregnant. When they want to use it to get pregnant, basically what they do, they would select days of fertility. Those days where you see the babies on them, we put the babies on purpose there to remind the woman that she is fertile. So in this cycle, you see the eyes. The eyes means intercourse. So this couple had intercourse on days of fertility, and as a result, they got pregnant. If a couple wants to use it to avoid getting pregnant, what they do, they avoid having intercourse on the days of fertility, and they select the days of infertility to have intercourse. It takes some discipline, self-mastery, but it's done. It can be done, and so many people are doing it. This is just a picture of the female anatomy. I just want to point to the fact that at the opening of the uterus, we have a canal called the cervix. And the cervix, under the influence of the cervical cribs, produces the cervical fluid that we're talking about. And this cervical fluid is very essential for the woman's fertility, because in the presence of this cervical fluid, the sperm can live inside the woman's body from 3 to 5 days. So when intercourse happens on a day of fertility, let's say today is a day of fertility, and there is a good quality of a mucus, the sperm will remain in the woman's body alive up to 3 to 5 days after today. And that's what's going to allow her to get pregnant, not just today, but in 5 days if ovulation is happening in 5 or 4 days. So it plays a role in the fertility process. What we're seeing here is a map of the cervix that was developed by Dr. AboAlyazid in Sweden. Basically, when the estrogen levels are high, the mucus really arranges itself into a parallel strand channels that allow the sperm to penetrate. And you can see them. You can see them very clearly in the picture. It allows the sperm to penetrate. And not only it allows the sperm to penetrate, it filters the sperm. This shows the importance of the cervical mucus role in the fertility, not only to allow survival of the sperm, but filtration of the sperm. So sperms that are not good, they will not go through those channels. Sperm like with 2 heads, it will not cross those channels. On the other side, we see a type G mucus, which is basically dryness, that is observed when the progesterone levels are high. And that's when the woman cannot get pregnant. No matter how many acts of intercourse happen during this phase, she will not get pregnant because the sperm cannot penetrate. And this is a microscopic photograph of the mucus. You see the type E when the estrogen levels are high. You see those channels running here. And this is when there is no mucus. And you can picture that like a wall-stone barrier to sperm penetration. That's why we call the cervix biological valve, Hanafi, biological valve. It allows the sperm to penetrate when there is a mucus, and it blocks the sperm from entering when there is no mucus. This slide shows us that when ovulation, before ovulation happens, actually, we have a few follicles that start growing, and when they're growing, they produce estrogen, and that's when the mucus is produced. So as ovulation approaches, the follicle is growing and the estrogen levels are rising, and that's when the woman observes the cervical mucus. Once ovulation happens, the follicle turns into yellow body, or what we call corpus luteum. And this body now starts producing progesterone, and there will be no more mucus during this phase. This phase is extremely important for the fertility process, because if the corpus luteum does not produce enough progesterone, this can cause 2 major problems with women. It can cause infertility, or it can cause miscarriages. There have been so many cases of a pregnant woman miscarrying, and their doctors couldn't figure out what was the reason for their miscarriage. And the reason was the corpus luteum was not producing enough progesterone. It was a simple problem that unfortunately a lot of doctors missed, and so many miscarriages had happened. So once the ovulation happened, the egg lives 12 to 24 hours, which is a very short time. That's where the mucus comes in role, because in the presence of good quality the mucus, as I mentioned, the sperm can live 3 to 5 days. But if there's no mucus, it can die within hours or even minutes after intercourse. So this, what we're really here talking about, is really a unique system of fertility regulation. It's a life-affirming women's reproductive health, and it provides an authentic language of a woman's health and fertility. And we'll see an example in a few minutes. Just from the chart, we can find a lot of things about the woman's health. It's a pro-woman, it's a pro-family, it's a pro-life, it's a pro-man, it's a pro-marriage. It's for the good of the community, for the good of the family. And it's an alternative to artificial reproductive technologies, as well as to birth control methods. And it's way more than birth control, because it can be used not only to achieve pregnancy or avoid pregnancy, but to monitor fertility, treat infertility, and treat gynecological problems. And it's a true system of family building. It's not contraceptive. It does not do anything that will stop conception from happening. It's just the way it works. The woman's body is designed in a way where the woman cannot be pregnant every time. So it does not stop this process from happening. It's just the couple do not have intercourse during time of fertility, and this way the pregnancy would not result. It's not abortifacient, and this is a very important point. A lot of people Unfortunately, a lot of women are on the birth control pill or other hormonal contraceptive, and they have no idea how it works in their bodies. This slide shows us 4 mechanisms of action for hormonal birth control. Hormonal birth control can inhibit ovulation, so it will stop the process that we just saw earlier where the follicle grows and the egg grows within it. Or it can make the cervical mucus very thick, which will not allow the sperm to penetrate. Or it can delay the transport of the sperm from here all the way up to the egg. If all these 3 mechanisms of action fail, there is a 4th mechanism of action, 4th one, that a lot of people are not aware of it. If all of that above failed, that means a woman is getting pregnant. There is a new fertilized egg. So what does the hormonal birth control do? They will stop implantation from happening. That means after conception, the fertilized egg comes and attaches itself to the lining of the uterus. But the hormonal birth control would make the lining of the uterus very thin, which will not allow implantation to happen. That's why there is the controversy, if you want to call it, when life begins or when conception happens, because they don't want to consider that the hormonal birth control is ending life. They want to consider that implantation is the beginning of life. I remember one time when I was a high school teacher, we were talking about this mechanism of action with our club after school. And when I finished explaining this, one of my juniors, 16 years old, James, he stood up and he said, I don't think women would be on the birth control pill if they understand what is this doing to their body. And the reality is so many women don't know what's happening and they stop taking those hormonal birth control and they end up facing problems because they stop their body from functioning the way it's supposed to. We cannot expect it to go back to normal just right away. It takes a long time to recover. Sometimes, unfortunately, some women's body don't recover from its effect. So it's not contraceptive, it's not abortifacient, and it's not the rhythm method because it does not rely on counting, but it relies on tracking biological marker. And it's all natural. We live in a time, I don't know about here in Lebanon, but in the US, a lot of people try to go organic, try to eat healthy, to exercise. Yet they take the birth control pill, which has nothing, there's nothing natural about it. What we're talking about today is 100% natural, designed for every woman. Of course, there are other natural methods, and I'm going to just touch on them briefly, but the Creighton is the one that I'm specialized in it, and that's why we're talking about it. There is the Sympto-Pro fertility education, which relies on tracking the temperature. There is also the couple-to-couple league Marquette model, and there is the Billings ovulation method, and the Creighton model, which we're talking about. So the Creighton model tracks the cervical fluid. Other methods track temperature, or they even track hormones. We rely only on one biomarker, which is the cervical fluid. And it was really easy to track it. It takes dedication, definitely, but it's very easy to track it once you learn how to do it. All what it takes is toilet tissue, and just when you're in the restroom and you track it. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Marise, for reminding us of the women's fertility system. And now we will, our next presenter would be Gretta Gibrine Abou Slaibi. She's got a master's degree in hospital and health management from the ISA Business School and master's degree in analysis and management of healthcare institutions from Paris Diderot, Paris 7, and the École des Hautes Études en Santé Publique from France. She's the CEO of Al-Mahabba Hospital and Primary Healthcare Center. She's a teacher of ethics of life and pluralism in the Antonine University at Zahle. And She's a seminar instructor at the Lebanese University Faculty of Sciences, the Master of Reproduction and Development, Lebanon. Thank you, Gretta, for continuing the talk of Marise on Introduction to the Creighton Model FertilityCare System.
Thank you, Amr. I'm continuing with the uses of Creighton Model System. As Marise said, there's many use for the system. It is used mainly to monitor, maintain, evaluate the women's gynecological health from puberty to menopause. It is used to either achieve or avoid pregnancy. The first study that I'm going to show is a study done in 1980 and published in 1998 in the Journal of Reproductive Medicine. The number of couples enrolled was 1,876 couples, with more than 17,000 couple months of use. This study was done to monitor how was the result of avoiding pregnancy in couples of normal fertility. The effectiveness was 99.5%, and the use effectiveness of the study to avoid pregnancy was 96.8%. These effectiveness measures are as good as oral contraceptive and better than any other drug or device on the market. Many studies went later, and the same results are obtained, like in Creighton University, St. John Mercy University, many other studies all over the world, the same results, 99.9% avoiding pregnancy. In achieving pregnancy, the system, as Marise said, is not contraceptive. It's also used by couples with normal fertility to achieve a pregnancy. The slide shows that on individual cycle-by-cycle effectiveness, when the days of fertility are selected for use, the pregnancy rate is 76% in the first cycle, 90% in the third, and 98% in the sixth cycles. And if in the first year, 21% of the couples used this technique to achieve pregnancy, so the fertility rate is 21%. The Creighton Model System with the NaProTECHNOLOGY are the first system that not only works on achieving and avoiding pregnancy, but it's a first women health science network family planning with reproductive health monitoring and maintenance. It's a fertility care based approach rather than fertility control approach to family planning and gynecological health. NaProTECHNOLOGY uses the Creighton Model FertilityCare System biomarkers to monitor easily and objectively the occurrence of various hormonal events during the menstrual cycle. NaProTECHNOLOGY provides valid information that can be interpreted by specialists all over the world because the procedures are standardized and it's a common language for everybody using this technique. So NaProTECHNOLOGY identifies the problems and cooperates with the menstrual and fertility cycle that correct the condition, maintain the human ecology, and sustain the procreative potential. Women now with these systems have an opportunity to know and understand the causes of the symptoms from which they suffer. So NaProTECHNOLOGY seeks out the underlying causes, repair the medical problems, then facilitates conception through the loving and self-given action of husband and wife, and not in the laboratory in a technical way. So unlike a common suppressive or destructive approach, it helps women maintain their dignity, the dignity of the family and of the fetus. This slide describes NaProTECHNOLOGY, how NaProTECHNOLOGY uses the Creighton model system, the chart, to explain what's happening in the woman body. So with the first row, with the stamps here, show there's no mucus, no white stamps with babies, so it's an infertility because we don't have a mucus, a cervical mucus secretion. The second one is a miscarriage because the bleeding occurs right after the peak day. The third one is a low progesterone chart because we have bleeding shortly after the ovulation. And the fourth one is abnormal bleeding, and that abnormal bleeding can be associated with many problems, hormonal problems, and even cancer. That's why it needs further medical exploration. Okay. So NaProTECHNOLOGY not only is used for infertility problem, it's a real solution for many problems, many problems in women, like menstrual cramps, premenstrual syndrome, ovarian cysts, repetitive miscarriage, chronic discharges. Many problems are diagnosed and treated with this technology. This slide shows the infertility treatment, the success rate, NaProTECHNOLOGY versus IVF. When endometriosis, when a woman suffers of endometriosis with NaProTECHNOLOGY, the success rate is nearly 76% versus 21% for in vitro fertilization. Polycystic ovaries 80% versus 25.6% in vitro fertilization, and the tubular occlusion is 38% versus 27.2%. So the system adds a completely new dimension to the successful achievement of pregnancy in couples with infertility and other reproductive problems. With the use of Creighton Model system only, the success rate is between 20 and 40%. With the Creighton Model system and medical treatment with NaProTECHNOLOGY, the success rate is up to 80%. The actual success rate will vary, of course, with different medical conditions. This slide shows a study made with 1,072 couples. The first column is before NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation, and the second column is after NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation. Before the NaPro evaluation, 500 couples suffered unexplained infertility. That's 47.2%. But after NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation, only 5 couples infertility remains unexplained. That's 0.5%. Miscarriage also after NaProTECHNOLOGY became 0.2%. It was 11.6% before NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation. The main factors that were shown in this study, because of the limited cervical mucus, as Marise said, this is a marker that is used in NaProTECHNOLOGY more than other techniques. So with the limited cervical mucus, only 12 people suffered this condition before NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation. The rate became 25.7% after NaProTECHNOLOGY evaluation, and the most findings were in the progesterone and estrogen hormone, because the level of progesterone and estrogen, in the laboratory we measure the levels at the 3rd and 4th and 5th day of the menstrual cycle. But with NaProTECHNOLOGY, it's after the ovulation, every 2 days after the ovulation. So we have the charting, and the level of estrogen and progesterone were implicated in 86% of couples that suffering infertility and 63% So that was the main findings. And in NaProTECHNOLOGY, they have the biosimilar hormones that can give to the woman that suffers a decreased level in estrogen or progesterone. That's why the number and effectiveness of this science is more relevant than in other sciences. Many studies also showed the same results, like in an Irish study, in Canadian study, Ukrainian study, and French study. The same reasons the same reasons were shown, mainly the decrease. Same result, mainly the decrease of progesterone and estrogen after the ovulation. Okay. What you have in your hands is the summary of the effectiveness summary of NaProTECHNOLOGY versus IVF technology, how to avoid pregnancy and fertility treatment, diagnosis of luteal phase, premenstrual dystrophic disorder, PMS, postpartum depression, and all the diseases that can suffer, that a woman can suffer of, plus the cost effectiveness. So Creighton model is cost effective, much more than birth control and IVF system. So NaProTECHNOLOGY has no harmful side effect. NaProTECHNOLOGY and Creighton model system support reproductive health, environmentally friendly, minimal costs, are adaptable to achieve or avoid pregnancy, encourage sexual maturity, and respect God's design to married love. So they have many positive effects, like increasing knowledge, respect of fertility of a couple, shared system. It's not my job or your job to chart the secretion of the uterus. It's our job. So it's a family matter. Children are seen as a gift, and with the SPICE technique, it increases communication. The SPICE technique is spiritual, physical, intellectual, communicative, and emotional. SPHSP, ICE. So there's a big difference between sexual contact and genital contact. With the genital contact, it's only a small part of the body of the woman and the man that are in contact. But with sexual contact, it's the whole person. So it's not just intercourse, it's the whole body. And with the NaProTECHNOLOGY and the Creighton model system, they encourage the people to do many activities, spiritual activities, physical, intellectual, creative, and emotional activities, so they become closer. When the genital contact is not needed or is not should not be done in order to avoid pregnancy, the sexual contact and the sexual interaction is highly recommended to strengthen the links of the couple. So many studies show that the SPICE technique strengthen the links of the couples. Like in a study made in 2018, 36 married couples were given this questionnaire. It's a 25 question, and they were measuring the index of how much they are satisfied with the technique, and the results show that they are very satisfied. It's 12 for the man and 11 for the woman, and each time the index is less than 30, it's very good index. Thank you.
So we're gonna wrap up with a quick story, and then we were going to share some testimonies from the book Women Heal, but God in His providence provided a client who's using it, who is with us here. She's American and she's living in Lebanon, and she will share her own testimony in a few minutes. I'm gonna share this, just a story, media cover-up. This is a book written by Dr. Hilgers, the founder of the Creighton Model, and inside a look at the war on women. In one of the chapters he titled Media Cover-Up, he shared a story that he read in a magazine, a story of a young woman, 18 years old, who was suffering from severe menstrual cramps, which is an indicator sometimes to endometriosis. And she went to her gynecologist, who told her that she really has endometriosis and it can affect her fertility. She needs to get pregnant as soon as possible, otherwise she won't get pregnant later. She was single, not engaged, not married, so he convinced her. She did in vitro from a total stranger, and she had babies, and she still suffers with her cramps. Dr. Holdres had similar case, a married woman who wanted to get pregnant. So he treated her and she got pregnant. He sent the story to the same magazine. They refused to publish it because unfortunately they don't want women to know that there is something that really empowers women, that really allows women to be in tune with their bodies and to be in control of their bodies. There are many stories and many examples. This is an example of just a couple struggling with infertility for 7 years, and they had completely dry cycles, and then there was only one cycle after the recommendation of her practitioner to take vitamin B6. She had 1 day of a mucus, which resulted in her getting pregnant. The next slide shows that when doctors do some testing, they just do it based on days in the cycle, and it doesn't really help much. The NaPro doctors, they do all their testing, and you'll hear that from Dr. Amr and Dr. Carpentier later. They do them based on a chart. That's why like day 22 is insignificant for us, because day 22 can be pre-ovulation for so many women. We want to share with you more. We will stop here. I'll let Kari come and talk, but I just want to let you know that we have social media pages. You can follow us. You can get more information. We're preparing for training in Lebanon in November, where faculty will come from the US to do the training. And this is Dr. Holdres with some of the babies that he delivered. And this is one of babies that he helped bring to this world through NaProTECHNOLOGY. And this is the book Women Healed. And I will let Kari introduce herself and share her own testimony. Kari, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Marise, and everybody who has helped coordinate this event and with the organization. I am very happy to be here. So as Marise said, I am from the US. I have been living in Lebanon for almost 1 year now. And I first heard of the Creighton method because I actually grew up not too far from Creighton University and the Pope Paul VI Institute, where it was founded. So I had always kind of heard of this thing growing up, but it wasn't until living in Brooklyn, I moved there in 2020, that I really started to understand what it was and to understand what that meant for me as a woman and what that meant for me and my health. I needed to go have a yearly checkup done. It had been longer than a year since I had a checkup, and at that time I was suffering from migraines almost every day. I would say out of 1 month, there were probably 20 days where I had a migraine episode. And I noticed that there were times where I was really irritable. I was mean to the people that I was living with my roommates. And then also I noticed that there were times where I just wanted to cry and I couldn't do anything about it. It was COVID. I was working, going into the office every day. So I was like, well, it's stress from COVID. But I actually have a friend who has similar values to me. My Catholic faith is very important to me. And she encouraged me to go to the Gianna Center in Manhattan. And so I went. I was able to have one of the doctors there agree to be my primary care physician. And I go in and we do the normal checkup. And she starts to ask me, by the end of the visit, is there anything else you want to discuss with me? And so I mentioned, like, yes, I'm feeling like, I have these intense moments of depression and I'm suffering from migraines. I'm trying to figure out my triggers. And that's when she starts to talk to me about charting. And I knew that it was a thing because I have many friends who have gotten married and have started charting using either the Billings method, some of them use the Creighton method, some of them use FEM, to know when they could have intercourse to achieve or avoid pregnancy. I was not at a point in my life where I was looking to do either one of those things, but she explained to me it's for much more than just pregnancy. It tells you a lot about your body. So I left that office, and she put me in touch with my educator, Carolina, and I would meet with Carolina. I had the introductory session with the PowerPoint, and then after that, she would teach me how to chart. So as Marise mentioned, when I look at the tissue paper, the toilet paper, what does it mean? Okay, and then how do I reflect that on my chart? And at the beginning, we met very often, and each time that I met with Carolina, I discovered more about my body, which for me was kind of shocking because I already felt pretty in tune with my body. I have a master's of public health degree specializing in exercise, so in physical activity and nutrition. So I tend to be aware of what's going on, how I'm feeling, things like that. But I discovered much more as I was charting and talking to Carolina. And then it came time for the blood tests that Marise alluded to. And I have to admit, at first it seemed very daunting because I was working full-time in New York City with a typical New York life of going all over the place. How in the world was I going to fit in these visits to a lab every 2 days, have my blood drawn, to check my progesterone, my estrogen, all of these other things? And now I can say, looking back on it, I would do it all over again because for me it really changed my life. Because of the charting and the NaProTECHNOLOGY, my physician was able to identify that there's a moment in my cycle where my progesterone plummets. And that causes so many different issues. And we found a link to, at a certain moment in my cycle is when I tend to have very severe migraine attacks. And I was very thankful that my friend sent me to the Gianna Center because as a public health professional in New York City, I knew that most of women's health is centered around the birth control pill. And I was actually prescribed the birth control pill when I was in my teens because I had heavy bleeding as a teenager. My period was absolutely horrible. And so my gynecologist said, "You're 16 years old, take this pill." Once I went off of it, my body went crazy. And so I was afraid of finding a doctor in New York that would do that same thing. That would just say, "This is the blanket like the blanket fix. Take the pill, has all of your hormones in it, it'll work itself out." But with Dr. Multi and NaProTECHNOLOGY, we identified the root cause. And for me as a user, but also as a public health professional, it was important to know what was causing these things. Instead of just saying, "This is it, okay, you have moments where you want to cry, take an antidepressant." No, I can now take real progesterone at a certain moment in my cycle. I have to be aware of my body still to this day. It's not like, okay, it's been 2 weeks since my last period ended, so it's time to take it. Like, I have to be aware of what's going on. But because of that, I can say my PMS symptoms are much better. Yes, sometimes it's still tough at times, but not nearly what it was before I started using the Creighton model and having the testing done with NaProTECHNOLOGY. And for me, that's a huge game changer to know that I remember the first month that I took the progesterone, I texted my doctor because it was amazing to be able to walk from the subway to my office without feeling like I was crying, because no joke, there were many days where in the 5-block walk, I would just start to cry because I felt overwhelmed, I couldn't handle it, and I thought it was normal. I was told that PMS was normal. I was one of those people. And I realized it's not normal, but it's common. And there's a big difference there. And so I'm forever grateful for the Gianna Center, for the Creighton model, and for NaProTECHNOLOGY, because being able to take the right medication that addresses the root cause has been a complete game changer for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kari, for your testimony. Thank you, Marise. Thank you, Gretta. Thank you for showing us that the Creighton system is not only to avoid pregnancy or to try to have pregnancy, but also it is a great tool to indicate irregularities in the women's body. So it's a women-friendly tool that can reconcile women with their bodies. Thank you very much. Before introducing Dr. Amr AboAlyazid from Egypt, I would like to also welcome Dr. Sophie. Dr. Sophie Sonibladze is a Georgian French doctor. She's married to a Lebanese. She lives in the United States. She's a family doctor. She wrote a book about le cycle féminin au naturel. She had also the formation of. She went through the.
She's a
NaProTECHNOLOGist.
Yeah.
So welcome, Dr. Sophie. You can intervene whenever you want after this, during the discussions. And now I introduce to you Dr. Amr AboAlyazid. Welcome, Dr. Amr. Dr. Amr is graduated as a surgeon from the medical faculty of Dr. University, Egypt, and he got his PhD in gynecology from Jamiat Al-Azhar, also in Egypt. He's the director of the Functional Gynecology Institute. He's the first gynecologist in the Middle East to specialize in NaProTECHNOLOGY as a medical consultant from the St. Paul VI Institute for the Study of Human Reproduction in Omaha, Nebraska, which is affiliated to the Creighton University. And he's a fellow of the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals. Welcome, Dr. Amr AboAlyazid. He will talk to us about NaProTECHNOLOGY, its application, medical aspects, and the surgical NaProTECHNOLOGY.
Greeting from Cairo, Egypt. First of all, I'd like to thank faculty of Public Sagesse University and Cedar of Lebanon FertilityCare Center for this kind invitation, and I'd like to be with you in person physically, but due to unexpected circumstances, I couldn't make it. So I am with you today. Hello, Marise.
Hi, doctor. Thank you.
Gretta, Dr. Paul, Dr. Sophie, and everyone. Today we will present you to an intro for NaProTECHNOLOGY. Let's go together to know the beginning of the story. In 1976 was the beginning of Creighton Model FertilityCare System in Omaha, Nebraska, when Dr. Thomas Hilgers and his fellows started to monitor the fertility cycles and the charting and make the basis of the Creighton Model FertilityCare System. Then in 1980, Creighton Model was fully described. And in 1982, the American Academy of Natural Family Planning was established. And in 1985, the Popol VI Institute and the science of NaProTECHNOLOGY was born to the whole world. And in 2016, it was my beginning, the beginning of the story of my story with NaProTECHNOLOGY, when I have applied for a fellowship for Santa Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska, United States, and I do the dual program, the fertility care practitioner and the fertility care medical consultant, to be affiliated from the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals and be one of the, I think, the first in the Middle East to be the medical consultant. And I am working with Ms. Marise in Lebanon as a practitioner. And actually, NaProTECHNOLOGY was a game changer in my professional life and in my patients' lives. We will introduce like a short video. I have recorded in
أنا دكتور عمرو أبوAlyazid
United States
من القاهرة جمهورية
in
مصر
2017.
أنا أول مصري وعربي يشارك في برنامج كرايتون ونابروتكنولوجي للحصول على درجة استشاري في رعاية الخصوبة. نابروتكنولوجي علم جديد بدأ في أمريكا ولاية نبراسكا، عمره حوالي 20 ل 30 سنة، من البحث والتطوير في مجال صحة المرأة، طفرة جديدة في علاج تأخر الحمل والإنجاب، بديل أفضل للحقن المجهري، وعلاج عديد من مشاكل السيدات زي الإجهاض المتكرر، تكيس المبايض، نزيف الرحمي، متلازمة ما قبل الدورة الشهرية وغيرها. نابروتكنولوجي ليست فقط ممارسات طبية وعلاجية لمشاكل المرأة الصحية، ولكن في رأيي هي أسلوب حياة متكامل متعدد الجوانب، ذو رؤية طبية احترافية وفلسفة ترسخ مبادئ أخلاقية في حياة الأسرة والمجتمع. في النهاية أنا بتقدم بخالص الشكر والتقدير لبروفيسور دكتور توماس هيلجر اللي أتاح الفرصة لي أن أكون من محترفي رعاية الخصوبة والنابروتكنولوجي في العالم. شكرا. عمرو أبوAlyazid.
Actually, I have recorded this video in 2017 after the finishing the final exam in the program, and it was after midnight. So you have noticed that I was very sleepy. It was after midnight after a long day. And by the way, in EP1, in education phase 1, I was the first in the class over 7 different countries. And in the EB2, education phase 2, I was first with a Canadian physician over 13 different countries from all over the world. And I was the first Arabian physician that's certified from Santa Rosa 6 Institute for a consultant for NaProTECHNOLOGY. So let's dive together into the sea of NaProTECHNOLOGY and have an intro. What is NaProTECHNOLOGY? NaProTECHNOLOGY stands for Natural Procreative Technology. Natural procreative technologies that can be defined as a new woman health science, which has as its main principle the ability to work cooperatively with the woman's menstrual and fertility cycles. It uses Creighton Model FertilityCare System, which is a prospective and standardized means of monitoring of the menstrual and fertility cycle, and it has multiple applications to the woman in the whole stages of reproductive age. There is a wide spectrum for the NaProTECHNOLOGY. NaProTECHNOLOGY can be applied pre-conceptional from the age of puberty through pregnancy and after conception and pregnancy throughout the childbearing period, period of the female, and up to the menopausal stage post conception. NaProTECHNOLOGY is the first system to network the family planning with reproductive and gynecological health monitoring and maintenance. It has many applications. It can be applied in infertility and subfertility, miscarriage and maintaining pregnancy, irregular cycles, hormonal problems, PMS or premenstrual syndrome. Many of women may be familiar with PMS, but a lot of men and husbands not familiar with premenstrual syndrome, which is a changes in the hormones of the female, especially in the second half of the cycle, that makes some changes like some headaches, bloating, abdominal pain, and nervousness, and easily crying and depression. But with NaProTECHNOLOGY, it has like a stepwise approach for management, and it's so easy to eliminate PMS if you are if you have these disrupting symptoms. NaProTECHNOLOGY can be applied also in ovarian cysts and unusual bleeding and effect of stress. We have two types of stress. There is acute stress and there is a chronic stress. So this stresses or stressors can affect the fertility hormones, even the whole body hormones and chemistry in both males and females. So we have to deal with the effect of stress on the fertility of both men and women. The advantages of NaProTECHNOLOGY, it's a medically safe approaches and proven reliable and comparatively inexpensive. Comparatively inexpensive, we have an example like in infertility, comparatively with the IVF or the ICSI. Actually, it's very expensive and have a social burden and a physical burden on the not on the women only, but the couple and the family and the whole community. And comparatively, NaProTECHNOLOGY has a triple success rate than ICSI and IVF. And it's a cumulative and every cycle. But IVF or artificial reproductive technology is only have one cycle trial, but NaProTECHNOLOGY, we can have like a repetitive every cycle trial, and it's comparatively inexpensive. NaProTECHNOLOGY is natural and cooperative and a shared system between the couples and respects the dignity of women and marriage. And it's standardized through the Creighton Model FertilityCare System, which can be used in different countries and different languages of all over the world. NaProTECHNOLOGY has a spectrum and many applications, which is medical, surgical, and perinatal applications. And I think you have an idea about this chart, which is a basic cycle of Creighton Model FertilityCare System. Like we see here, there is this is the normal or the average fertility cycle. It starts with red stamps that represent the menstrual cycle and the bleedings, and then followed by green stamps that represents the dry or the infertility period before the mucus cycle, which represents by the white baby stamps, which is the fertility window, and then the peak day, which is simulating the ovulatory event happening in the fertility cycle, and followed by an extended fertility window for 3 days, and then back to the infertility days represented by the green stamps. And this is a correlation, the hormonal correlation of the fertility cycle. The black bars represents the estrogen levels throughout the cycle, as we see, and the red bars represents the progesterone levels throughout the post-peak phase or the post-ovulatory phase. This is Creighton Model Fertility Care System in long cycle. As we notice here in this case, the cycle is 51 days, and the peak day or the ovulatory day or the ovulatory event happening on day 38 here. And the post-peak phase or the post-ovulatory phase was 13 days in duration. This is the application of Creighton Model Fertility Care System in breastfeeding, and there is like a swinging of hormones after delivery and during the breastfeeding. And as we notice here, there is like patches of mucus that represents the swinging of the hormones throughout the months of the breastfeeding. And as we notice here, that ovulation may occur before seeing any menstrual bleeding. So monitoring of the fertility through breastfeeding can be optimized by Creighton Model Fertility Care System to avoid to get pregnant on lactational amenorrhea. In this case, there is a normal fertility, and the Creighton Model Fertility Care System, as we notice here, is used to achieve pregnancy. The acts of intercourse here and here in day 16 and 18 should be expected to result in pregnancy because it's happening in the fertility window and around the peak day. So it's achieving related behavior in using Creighton Model Fertility Care System. This charts, this slide is very important, and we should concentrate here. Like the first line represents a case of infertility. This case has apparently normal fertility cycle, apparently normal. It's actually 28 days of menstrual cycle, apparently normal cycle. But when it charted with Creighton Model Fertility Care System, we have noticed that there is a limited mucus cycle. It's only 1 day of mucus. I hope that you have an idea about Creighton Model Fertility Care System in the previous presentations. So this represents only a mucus, 1 day of mucus cycle. It's a peak, and it's a limited mucus cycle. So it's a case of infertility. It's abnormal. It's abnormal mucus cycle because the normal mucus cycle, or the average mucus cycle of normal fertility is between 3 days and 8 days, with average of 5 days. And this is a limited mucus cycle in an apparently normal fertility cycle. So it represents a case of infertility. In the second line, this cycle may be apparently normal, but it's slightly short. It's at 23 days, and it's a short cycle, but it has like a normal mucus cycle. It has an actually 7 days or 7 days of mucus cycle and 3 days post peak fertility window, extended fertility window, but there is a recurrent miscarriage. Why a recurrent miscarriage? Because there is a post peak, a short post peak. There is a short post peak phase that results mainly in a recurrent miscarriage. Okay, Marise wants to say something.
Yes, can I ask you a favor? هيدي شرحناها شوي قبل بالانجلش بعدين اكتشفنا انه في معنا French educated people. Do you mind تشرح هيدي السلايد بالعربي للي ما فهموها قبل إذا بتريد لحتى يفهموا أكثر كيف الشارت بيساعدنا نفهم عن صحة المرأة؟
اوكي لو انتم محتاجين ان احنا نشرح بعض السلايد بالعربي يا ريت تعرفونا.
اذا فيك تحط شويه عربي من هلا لانه اكتشفنا بالبريك انه في كم شخص هون ما كثير فهموا باول محاضره لانه they're French educated. So English وشويه Arabic would be perfect if you don't mind.
اوكي.
Thank you.
خلينا نشرح السلايد المهمه دي لانها هي مهمه جدا وبتوضح لنا حاجات كتير في الابلكيشن او في التطبيقات بتاعه كريتون موديل، نظام كريتون لرعايه الخصوبه والنابرو تكنولوجي. احنا قلنا معلش هنعيد لكم سريعا في الفيرست هنعيد لكم سريعا اول دوره هنا في دوره الخصوبه هي ظاهريا باينه ان هي دوره متوسطه وطبيعيه، هي طولها تقريبا 28 يوم. تمام. الدم الحيض فيها افريج وذ النورمال حوالي 6 ايام. بس اللي ملحوظ هنا ان الميوكاس سايكل او دوره الافرازات المخاطيه اللي هي بتمثل نافذه الخصوبه في الدوره الشهريه هي عباره عن يوم واحد فقط، اللي هو ده اللي متعلم عليه اللي هو البيك داي، وطبعا بنحط بعديه 3 ايام زي اكستندد او امتداد للخصوبه. بس ده ابنورمال، ده غير طبيعي، لان الدوره الطبيعيه دوره المخاط الطبيعيه اللي بتمثل الخصوبه الطبيعيه من 3 ايام ل 8 ايام بمتوسط 5 ايام، وبالتالي كونها اللي هي تنزل ليوم واحد طبعا ده غير طبيعي، وبالتالي اترجم الموضوع عندنا في تاخر للحمل والانجاب. It's a case of infertility. مش هنقول اللي هو لازم يحصل علاقة هنا في اليوم ده عشان يحصل حمل، لا، بس هو ده مش طبيعي، عشان كده مش بيحصل حمل طبيعي بسهولة. في السايكل الثانية أو في التشارت الدورة الثانية هنا هنلاحظ إن هي بتمثل حالة إجهاض متكرر. لو احنا لاحظنا هنلاقي والله ظاهريا هي ممكن تكون منتظمه وبتيجي كل شهر، بس هي قصيره شويه، قصيره، هي تقريبا 23 يوم. ال 23 يوم دول طبعا في النابرو تكنولوجي ان جنرال اتس شورت سايكل، ولكن احنا ملاحظين هنا ان دوره الافرازات المخاطيه اللي بتمثل نافذه الخصوبه طبيعيه جدا ما فيهاش اي مشكله، ولكن بيحصل حمل بس بيحصل اجهاض. ليه؟ لان احنا في حاجه اسمها البيك داي، ده اللي هو يوم الذروه اللي بيمثل التبويض. تمام. بيقسم الدوره الشهريه لجزئين، جزء ما قبل البيك او ما قبل الذروه، ومرحله اسمها مرحله ما بعد الذروه. مرحله ما بعد الذروه دي الافريج او المتوسط الطبيعي بتاعها من 9 ايام ل 17 يوم، وبالتالي اقل من كده ده غير طبيعي، اكتر من كده ده غير طبيعي. احنا عندنا في النساء والولاده في حاجه اسمها اليوتيل فيز ديفكت او خلل في الجزء المرحله اللي بعد التبويض، ودي ان جنرال في الكونفنشنال جينيكولوجي او في امراض نساء ولاده العاديه دي نوع واحد اسمه اليوتيل فيز ديفكت. لكن احنا في النابرو تكنولوجي اليوتيل فيز ديفكت has 5 types، 5 انواع. ده نوع من ضمن الانواع بتاعه اليوتيل فيز ديفكت. احنا لو لاحظنا ان بعد البيك اليوتيل فيز هنا او البوست بيك فيز مرحله ما بعد الذروه هي 5 ايام فقط، وهي اقصر من الحد الادنى من الطبيعي اللي هو 9 ايام. وبالتالي كل ما يحصل حمل في الدوره دي زي ما احنا شايفين هنا يحصل حمل طبيعي جدا، لان الافرازات المخاطيه اللي بتمثل خصوبه طبيعيه وكويسه، فممكن يحصل حمل ولكن بيحصل اجهاض بعديها. تمام. نيجي للمرحله الدوره الثالثه. الدوره الثالثه هنا هنلاقي ان الدوره برضو طبيعيه 28 يوم، ولكن في حاجه اسمها بري منسترال سبوتنج او زي تنقيط للدم غير طبيعي موجود قبل الدوره الشهريه. وطبعا التنقيط ده غير طبيعي بيدل ان الجسم الاصفر اللي موجود في المبيض اللي بيحصل بعد التبويض هو ضعيف، مش بيقدر يطلع كميات الهرمونات بالمستويات الطبيعيه سواء البروجستيرون او الاستروجين، وبالتالي بيعمل زي سبوتنج او نزول نقط للدم قبل الدورة الشهرية. ودي طبعا لو تخطت اليومين بتتحسب على الدورة اللاحقة أو السابقة زي ما احنا شايفين هنا. وطبعا ده عندنا abnormal عند بعض السيدات أو عند بعض الدكاترة، هم ممكن ما ياخدوش بالهم اللي هم عندهم مشكلة في التنقيط اللي قبل الدورة أو في التنقيط اللي بعد الدورة اللي هو موجود في آخر دورة شهرية. زي ما احنا شايفين الدورة هنا حوالي 3 أيام اللي هم heavy moderate and light، وبعد كده بيبقى فيه نقط دم بتنزل بصفة منتظمة تقريبا أغلب أوقات الشهر، وده طبعا abnormal bleeding وغير طبيعي. لو احنا مش بنلاحظ او بنراقب الفيرتيليتي سايكل بكريتون موديل فيرتيليتي كير سيستم مش هنقدر نحط ايدينا على الاسباب او المشاكل اللي احنا شايفينها دي عشان نعرف نعمل لها انتربريتيشن او ترجمه. عندنا في النابرو تكنولوجي احنا ايه المشكله وايه الفحوصات اللي احنا هنبنيها على الدوره الشهريه اللي احنا شايفينها دي عشان نكتشف ايه المشكله اللي ممكن تكون موجوده ونقدر نساعد بناء على التشارت دي الكابلز في مشكلتهم ايا كانت المشكله اللي بيواجهوها. اتمنى تكون السلايدز اتشرحت مظبوط. احنا هنبدا دلوقتي نتكلم على the union of procreative education and the medical technology of NaProTECHNOLOGY. NaProTECHNOLOGY is a medical science which has the education of the patients. تعليم المرضى as its foundation، هو الأساس الخاص بتعليم كريتون موديل فيرتيليتي كير سيستم اللي بنقدر نستخدمه عشان نطبق بروتوكولات النابروتكنولوجي. It educates the women in the objectives parameters of their menstrual and fertility cycle so they can develop a partnership أو شراكة بين الطبيب المعالج والكابلز أو المريض في التقييم وفي العلاج in evaluation and treatment. ايه هي مميزات او اللي بيميز خصائص النابرو تكنولوجي؟ اتس ستاندردايزد، هي موحده المعايير through standards of Creighton Model FertilityCare System and can be used in different languages and all over the countries because of the standardization. It's an objective science and it's reproducible and can be interpreted. ممكن نستخلص منها البيانات اللي ممكن نستخدمها في التقييم الطبي وفي العلاج. It's unique، فريدة من نوعها لأنها مختلفة عن الconventional obstetrics and gynecology أو أمراض النساء والولادة العادية اللي احنا بندرسها في الكلية أو في كليات الطب. and has the ability to identify the underlying cause. هي بتختلف في احنا بندور على السبب وبنحط ايدينا على المشكلة الطبية اللي موجودة، وبالتالي ممكن بمعرفة السبب وتحديد المشكلة to establish a form of treatment. It relies on medical technology and can has many applications in medical and surgical and perinatal aspects of NaProTECHNOLOGY. NaProTECHNOLOGY approaching the woman as whole person. بناخد المرأة ككل، مش جزء أو بنفصلها أو بنعالجها زي ما احنا بنقول مثلا إن الخصوبة للأسف في بعض الأحيان عند السيدات هي مرض. لا، هي مش مرض، هي نعمة من عند ربنا، وطبعا لازم نحافظ عليها وننميها ونحسنها، مش اللي احنا نعالجها او نعمل لها distraction او disruption. NaProTECHNOLOGY لما بدأت تنتشر كميديكال ساينس هي عملت تغيرات جذرية في المفاهيم عند أطباء النساء والولادة. Here are the paradigm shift with NaProTECHNOLOGY. The first one، أول تغيير جذري أو فارق ما بين ال conventional gynecology and the NaProTECHNOLOGY مبدأ achieving and avoiding pregnancy. Please انا اكمل، حابين ان انا اكمل عربي وانجليش ولا عربي بس ولا انجليش بس ولا ميكس ما بين الاثنين as you like. Do you hear me? We will talk today on the first principle of NaProTECHNOLOGY and it's achieving and avoiding pregnancy. تحقيق الحمل أو تجنب الحمل. نظام كريتون لرعاية الخصوبة is a foundational family planning system of NaProTECHNOLOGY and it's acceptable to the couples either to achieve or to avoid pregnancy. In modern reproductive medicine, the approach to family planning is either suppression or distraction. هو إما التصويت أو تدمير الخصوبة باستخدام وسائل منع الحمل المختلفة اللي بتأثر فعلا على الخصوبة، بالعكس بتضر المرأة ككل، مش بتخدم الهدف منها. الاستراليزيشن أو استحداث العقم عند السيدات طبعا relies on the principle that the human beings are unable to develop any level of self-mastery towards the genital sexuality. But in NaProTECHNOLOGY Creighton and the Creighton Model FertilityCare System, the patients and the clients are accepted as individuals who are capable of living in a positive way with normal function of fertility. So it introduced a principle of selective intercourse vs a spontaneous intercourse. The current approaches to the management of fertility requires that spontaneous intercourse to be protected at all costs. But in NaProTECHNOLOGY and Creighton models, the principle of selective intercourse is introduced. العلاقة الاختيارية. وبالتالي السلكتيف انتركورس بتساعد الكابلز to making a decisions have a decision making choices، اختيارات في القرارات بتاعت الحمل او تجنب الحمل. وده طبعا بيبقى مهم جدا في المشاركة الزوجية بين الزوجين. Spontaneous intercourse involves submission of emotional impulses, but selective intercourse submits itself to choices evaluated and implemented through incorporation of the intellect and the will and the values that the couples shares together. The next principle is a cerebrocentric sexuality vs a genetocentric sexuality. لازم نعرف الفرق ما بين السيربروسنتريك سيكشواليتي اللي بيتحكم فيها العقل والجينيتوسنتريك سيكشواليتي اللي بيتحكم فيها الأعضاء التناسلية. السيربروسنتريك سيكشواليتي it's a corporation of the intellect and the will and the focusing personal and internal in the couples and maintains connections between love and life and leads to personalization and humanization and physiological and spiritual affirmation. Cerebrocentric sexuality respects the dignity of man and woman and the integrity of marriage. The genetocentric sexuality, the genitals master the relationship and focusing just physical and external. There is a separation between love and life and leading to depersonalization and dehumanization, physiological and spiritual deprivation. Genetocentric sexuality increases the family violence and rate of divorces. So, Creighton Model FertilityCare System and NaProTECHNOLOGY introduce the acronym of
Dr. Amr,
yeah.
Can you explain SPICE إذا بتريد بالعربي لأنه شرحناه قبل بالإنجليش هيك بهالطريقة اللي ما فهموا قبل بيفهموا بالعربي هلا if you don't mind. Sorry about that. إذا بدك كمل بالعربي.
حلو جدا اللي انتوا عايزينه، احنا
مفيش مشكلة. Thank you doctor. Thank you. We appreciate that.
السبايس يا جماعة، السبايس ده مش بهارات، ده اختصار ل5 كلمات. اس بتمثل الأبعاد المختلفة للعلاقة الجنسية أو اللي احنا بنسميه في المجتمع الشرقي العلاقة الزوجية. لازم نعرف إن العلاقة الزوجية مختلفة عن العلاقة الجنسية، مختلفة عن العلاقة الحميمية. في فرق ما بين الاثنين. العلاقة الجنسية هي مفهوم أشمل وأعم. النابروتكنولوجي بنستخدم اكرونيم اوف سبايس عشان نترجم بيه الابعاد المختلفه للعلاقه الجنسيه. اس فور سبيرشوال هي علاقه روحانيه فيها الموده والرحمه اللي ما بين الزوجين. بي فيزيكال هي علاقه جسديه. العلاقه الجسديه دي اللي هي العلاقه الحميميه اللي هي العلاقة الحميمية اللي ما بين الزوجين اللي بتبدأ بالرغبة الجنسية والاستثارة والعلاقة وهكذا، اللي هي العلاقة الجسدية. الآي intellectual هي علاقة فكرية، العقل هو اللي بيتحكم فيها مش الأعضاء التناسلية. سي creative communicative. الكرياتيفيتي في العلاقة الزوجية أو الابتكار في العلاقة الزوجية، إزاي الكابلز يكسر الروتين اليومي اللي ما بين الزوجين، إزاي يعني ما يبقاش كل يوم شكل التاني. بمعنى الموضوع مش يا جماعة مش لازم نجيب ورد أو تشوكلت عشان نغير المود بتاع البارتنر بتاعنا. لا، ممكن بكلمة بسيطة أو برسالة حتى على الموبايل ما بين الزوجين ممكن ان احنا نغير المود اللي ما بين الزوجين. دي الكرياتيفيتي في العلاقة الزوجية. تمام، ازاي نحسن العلاقه يوم بعد يوم. الكوميونيكيشن هو التواصل والحوار بين الزوجين. الاي فور ايموشنال علاقه عاطفيه بيتحكم فيها الايه العواطف والمشاعر والاحساس بالطرف الاخر. ولو لاحظنا ان اي خلل في اي بعد من ابعاد العلاقه الجنسيه اللي متجمعين في السبايس برنسبل ده بيأثر على الابعاد الاخرى، وبالتالي هي علاقه متكامله لازم اللي احنا نحاول نوصل بيها مع الكابلز العلاقه الشامله. دلوقتي هندخل على المبدأ الثاني وهو البروسبكتيف vs retrospective data collection. بمعنى ايه؟ هو Creighton Model FertilityCare System نظام استباقي بيستخدم جمع البيانات بصورة استباقية، مش بعد لما المشكلة تحصل أو بعد نبقى بأثر رجعي. لا، هي الصورة الاستباقية اللي بيستخدمها كريتون موديل فيرتيليتي كير سيستم والنابرو تكنولوجي، اللي احنا بنحاول ان احنا نظبط الفيرتيليتي سايكل او دورة الخصوبة الخاصة بالمرأة. لو هي مثلا بتفكر في حمل او حاجة، احنا دايما بنقول ان الحمل بيبدأ من قبل الحمل، مش بننتظر لما الحمل يحصل وبعد كده بنبدأ نحاول ان احنا نمانج الموضوع، سواء بقى في الاجهاض المتكرر او في المشاكل اللي بتحصل في الحمل او هكذا. لا، احنا سواء في مشاكل تأخر الحمل والإنجاب او الاجهاض المتكرر او تكيس المبايض او النزيف الرحمي او خلل ومتلازمة ما قبل الدورة الشهرية، او ايا كان المشكلة اللي في الخصوبة اللي الكابل بيواجهها، احنا بنبقى دايما بنحاول نسبق بخطوه، بحيث ان احنا نقدر نظبط نوصل لدوره خصوبه مثاليه، تمام، نستريح بيها او نعالج بيها المشكله. زي ما احنا شايفين هنا في ده التشارت بتاع كريتون موديل فيرتيليتي كير سيستم او نظام كريتون لرعايه الخصوبه، وده البيك داي. احنا ممكن بنطلب فحوصات في اوقات معينه من دوره الخصوبه، زي التارجت بري اوفيولاتوري E2 بروفايل. احنا بنختار في ايام معينه مستويات هرمونات معينه بنطلبها، وفي البوست بيك فيز برضو بعد البيك بنطلب في ايام معينه هرمونات معينه، بحيث ان احنا نعرف المستويات المختلفه للهرمونز في دوره الخصوبه. النابرو تكنولوجي اعتمدت على جمع المعلومات الاستباقيه في تقييم المنسترال اند فيرتيليتي سايكلز، ولكن لو احنا لاحظنا في كل كتب الطب واللي احنا بندرسه من سنه 1915 لغايه دلوقتي، هنلاقي اللي هي بتعتمد على ريتروسبكتيف داتا كولكشن او تجميع الداتا بصوره لاحقه. طبعا كريتون موديل غير كل ده، اللي احنا بنراقب الفاريوس بيولوجيكال ماركرز او العلامات الحيويه المختلفه، وبالتالي بنقدر ناخد قرارات وبنعمل تقييم افضل لدوره الخصوبه. الكونسبت اللي احنا المبدا اللي النابرو تكنولوجي قدمه وعمل فيه طفره برضو، هو الباند ايد ابروتشز فور VS getting the underlying causes، اللي احنا بنفرق ان الاختيارات الطبيه الحاليه هي فقط مسكنات للمشاكل، هي ما بتعالجش المشكله من جذورها. للاسف هي مسكنات خارجيه. يعني مثلا لو احنا جينا للديسمنوريا او الريجولار سايكلز او الابنورمال بليدنجز او recurrent ovarian cysts، زي الام الدوره الشهريه او الدوره الغير منتظمه او النزيف الرحمي او تكيس او الاكياس اللي على المبايض، ممكن سهل جدا اللي احنا نحط السيده على البيرث كنترول بيلز، او نديها هرمونات او هرمونات منع الحمل او حبوب منع الحمل لعلاج مشكله ملهاش علاقه بمنع الحمل، تمام. وهكذا تاخر الحمل والانفيرتيليتي والعقم او تاخر الحمل والانجاب. اول حاجه بقت تتعمل اللي احنا نحول على الART او الحقن المجهري او اطفال الانابيب من غير حتى ما نعرف ايه السبب اللي وراء المشكله. ولكن النابرو تكنولوجي بتركز على اللي احنا نعرف سبب المشكله، مش اللي احنا نتجاوزه ونعمل له باي باس بدون معرفه سبب المشكله وعلاجها. So NaProTechnology, it solves many problems that we haven't been able to solve in the past with different approaches than the conventional practice. NaProTechnology is not opposed to technology. في الحقيقة النابروتكنولوجي بتستخدم كل التقنيات الحديثة عشان نوصل بيها لخدمة أفضل للبشرية والخصوبة وصحة المرأة. النابروتكنولوجي بتجتذب الأفراد اللي بيدوروا على الأكشوال تريتمنت، العلاج الحقيقي، والسترونج ماريج والهيلثي فاميليز. نابروتكنولوجي بتجتذب ايضا مقدمي الرعايه الصحيه اللي عايزين ان يدوروا فعلا او يحلوا المشكله من جذورها، مش نتركها بدون حل. الطفرات اللي النابروتكنولوجي عملتها بالترتيب: achieving and avoiding pregnancy, selective intercourse vs spontaneous intercourse, sexuality, it's a cerebrocentric sexuality, not a genetocentric sexuality, prospective data collection vs a retrospective data collection, and the band-aid approach vs getting through the underlying causes. It's cooperative approaches, not suppressive or destructive approaches. ولازم طبعا نصيحه، بس النصيحه دي بحذر لو احنا هنطبق النابروتكنولوجي، سواء مرضى هيستخدموا نظام كريتون لرعايه الخصوبه او اطباء هيتعاملوا بالنابروتكنولوجي، لازم ما نستخدمهاش بطريقه عشوائيه او سطحيه، لازم تو جو ديب، لازم نعرفها بكل تفاصيلها عشان نقدر نساعد المرضى بتوعنا بالشكل الصحيح والكامل. لكن لو احنا خدنا قشور عن النابروتكنولوجي او نظام كريتون، تاكد ان انت مش هنعرف نستخدمه بالشكل الصحيح، وبالتالي مش هنوصل للنتائج المرجوه في النهايه، سواء ده للمرضى او للاطباء. هقدم لكم تو كيس سيناريوز من الحالات اللي انا اشتغلت عليها في مصر. I have many cases since 2017, and this case is about infertility، حالة عن تأخر الحمل والإنجاب. ودي كانت من أوائل الحالات اللي أنا اشتغلت عليها أول ما رجعت من أمريكا، وكانت انترستنج جدا، وطبعا ادتني positive and inspiring push اللي انا اقدر اكمل واساعد المرضى بتوعي من السكسس ستوريز اللي انا لقيتها. دي كانت حاله 30 سنه، متجوزه بقالها 8 سنين، وعندها برايمري انفيرتيليتي او تاخر حمل اولي. وطبعا كان عندها irregular and long cycles، وعندها facial hair and acne for many years، وخدت اندكشن كتير، خدت تحفيز للتبويض وتنشيط للتبويض على مدار سنين من المعاناة. وطبعا عملت محاولتين للحقن المجهري وفشلوا. هي كانت اوفر ويت شوية، وطبعا التشخيص بتاعها كان PCOS أو متلازمة تكيس المبايض. احنا طبعا عملنا الورك اب بتاعنا، الفحوصات بتاعتنا السيستماتايزد، تحليل السائل المنوي للزوج، وكان طالع كويس جدا. السونار المهبلي واللي وضح ان في بوليسيستيك اوفريز موجودين، وكان الفوليوم الحجم الاوفريز 14 سنتيمتر مكعب. الاشعه بالصبغه اللي احنا عملناها كانت فري، ما كانش في اي مشكله في الرحم وفي الانابيب بتاعت قنوات فالوب. واخر منظار اتعمل ما كانش فيه اي مشكله، وكان في خلل واضح في الهرمونات فيما يدل على متلازمه تكيس المبايض. وكان الاي ام اتش او مخزون المبيض بتاعها كان 10.8 نانو جرام بير ملي متر، وده كان مخزون مبيض عالي جدا، واللي مشهور بيه مرضى تكيس المبايض اللي هم عندهم مخزون مبيض عالي. المتوسط على فكرة للعلم ان متوسط مخزون المبيض الطبيعي للمرأة في سن الحمل والإنجاب بيبقى من 1 ل 3، اقل من واحد ده غير طبيعي، او في مخزون مبيض قليل، واكتر من 3 ده بيبقى طبعا شويه مخزون عالي. طبعا مرضى تكيس المبايض بيبقى عندهم الاي ام اتش او مخزون المبيض بيبقى هايلي انكريزد، وفي الحاله دي كان 10 و8 من 10. وتاخدوا بالكم من الرقم ده عشان احنا هنتناقش فيه مع الدكاتره في الاجراء اللي احنا هنعمله. الاجراء النابرو تكنولوجي بيقدمه وبيحبذه جدا وبيدافع عنه على مر السنين وبيطوره على مر السنين هو الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن، او استئصال جزء من الويدج او مثلث من المبيض، وده عشان نرجع حجم المبيض للشكل الطبيعي تاني وللحجم الطبيعي تاني. واللي وجدنا على مر الليتريتشر او في المرجعيات العلميه ان الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن او الحل الجراحي لاستئصال جزء صغير من المبيض لاستعاده الحجم الطبيعي للمبيض والوظيفه الطبيعيه للمبيض هو افضل الحلول واكثرها فاعليه في انتظام التبويض وحدوث الحمل والانجاب. ولكن كانت واجهتهم على مدار السنين في الثمانينات وما قبل الثمانينات في القرن الماضي ان الاجراء الجراحي ده كان بيتسبب او ليه مشكلتين. زعم في مشكلتين، المشكلتين هما ايه؟ احنا يا جماعه احنا هنشوف دي اللونج سايكل اللي بتبقى موجوده في مرضى تكيس المبايض او البوليسيستيك اوفري. بيبقى عندهم دوره طويله. الدوره الطويله ممكن توصل لغايه 3 شهور، لان التبويض في مرضى تكيس المبايض بيحصل اقل من 8 مرات في السنه. 8 مرات في السنه تبويض فقط، وبالتالي ممكن اقل من كده. ممكن الفيميل يجي لها دوره، تشوف دوره كل شهرين كل 3 ايا كان الدوره بتاعتها او التبويض بيحصل امتى. لو لاحظنا هنا ان التبويض حصل في اليوم ال 38، ده فرضا ان الدوره بتجي لها كل شهرين يعني. فان التبويض او لازم العلاقه تحصل في الوقت ده عشان تقدر تحمل بشكل طبيعي. ولكن مش ده لوحده التارجت بتاعنا في مرضى تكيس المبايض. احنا طبعا عشان نشخص تكيس المبايض لازم في كرايتيريا او مواصفات للمرضى دول عشان نقدر نقول ان دول عندهم متلازمه تكيس المبايض، ونقدر اللي احنا نساعدهم او هيستفيدوا من الاجراء الجراحي لتكيس المبايض. لازم يبقى عندهم خلل في الدوره الشهريه، وده غالبا ما بتبقى دوره طويله، الدوره بتيجي كل شهرين او 3. البوليسيستيك اوفريز بالالترا ساوند في تكيس واضح بالمبايض في بالموجات فوق الصوتيه او الايكو او السونار اللي على الحوض وارتفاع نسبه هرمونات الذكوره او الاندروجينز. كان زمان المشكله بتاعت الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن اللي كانت بتتسبب في التصاقات حاده بالحوض، وبالتالي كانت بتزود المشكله بتاعه تاخر الحمل والانجاب، لانها كانت بتعمل الادهيجنز دي لانهم كانوا بيسيبوا الرو سيرفيس او زي طريقه في العمليه ممكن تتسبب في حدوث ادهيجنز او التصاقات بالبطن والحوض. ولكن في مع نبرة التكنولوجي الموضوع اتطور باستخدام تقنيات مضاده للالتصاقات على مر السنين. طبعا من اول الميني لاباروتومي زي ما احنا شايفين الفتح البطن الجراحي الصغير باستخدام خطوات جراحيه بتقلل الالتصاقات داخل تجويف البطن للمنظار الجراحي، ومؤخرا الروبوتيك سيرجري او استخدام الروبوت او الجراحه الروبوتيه في تنفيذ الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن باقل احتماليه لحدوث حمل مع بعض الاجراءات اللي بتستخدم اثناء الجراحه زي الكونتينوس انستليشن او frequent installation of anti-adhesive fluids and use of anti-adhesive membranes او الانسجه او بعض الممبرينز اللي مضاده للالتصاقات اللي احنا ممكن اللي احنا نغلف بيها المبيض والانابيب بحيث ان احنا نقلل فرصه الالتصاقات بعد الولاده. احنا قربنا نخلص. ده متابعه بعد بعد سنتين وبعد 5 سنين للاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن بالالترا باللاباروسكوبي، وبنلاحظ ان طبعا البلو سوتشرز او الخيوط اللي احنا بنستخدمها مضاده للالتصاقات واضحه وما فيش فيها اي التصاقات. بنستخدم التارجت بري اوفيولاتري هرمون بروفايلز على تقييم الدوره، ودي كانت التشارت بتاعه الفيميل. الحاله اللي معانا زي ما احنا شايفين هي كانت لونج سايكل، وبدانا فعلا عملنا اوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن، وفي ثاني سايكل على طول الدوره اللي بعد الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن حصل حمل في ثاني دوره على طول، حمل طبيعي بطريقه طبيعيه جدا. والدوره نزلت من 47 يوم ل 37 يوم، وبعد كده حصل تبويض وحصل بريجننسي تيست، ودي التشارت بتاعتها في الفولو ابس. وكانت لو احنا لاحظنا هنا ان المينسترال سايكل بتاعتها كانت لغايه 60 يوم ممكن شهرين ما تجيش. طبعا ده اخر مولود. على فكره في 15 3 2022 هي عندها 3 اولاد دلوقتي، 3 اولاد وولدوا، والحمل حصل بشكل طبيعي جدا. لقينا ان السايكل بتاعتها بقت منتظمه، الهرمونال ليفلز بتاعتها قربت للنورمال، واثناء القيصريه ادي الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن بتاعنا طبعا ما فيهوش اي التصاقات وما فيهوش اي حاجه. البنفيتس بتاعت الاوفيريان ويدج ريسكشن از تريتمنت للبي سي او اس، هي استعاده للهرمونات واستعاده السايكليسيتي بتاعت الخصوبه بتاعت الدوره الشهريه. ودي اخر سلايد عندنا بنوضح فيها الاستاتستكس او الاحصائيات اللي ما بين النابروتكنولوجي والعلوم الاخرى او الكونفنشنال جينيكولوجي. طبعا استخدام نظام كريتون لرعايه الخصوبه بنسب نجاح لتجنب الحمل تصل ل 99.5% واب تو 97% كوسيله لتجنب الحمل، بالمقابل لحبوب منع الحمل اللي هي فعاليه اقل واضرار اكثر. الانفيرتيليتي تريتمنت او استخدام النابروتكنولوجي كوسيله لعلاج تاخر الحمل والانجاب مع الاندومتريوزس او بطانه الرحم المهاجره تصل نسب النجاح من 56% ل 76%، في المقابل ل 21% في طب امراض النساء والولاده العادي والاجراءات الاعتياديه. البوليسيستيك اوفري لغايه 80% نسب نجاح في المقابل 25% فقط في الكونفنشنال تريتمنت البوليسيستيك اوفري. والتيوبال اوكلوجن في انسداد الانابيب في اجراءات متعدده بناء على نوع الانسداد ومكان الانسداد. السيرجيكال نابروتكنولوجي باستخدام التقنيات الجراحيه الحديثه والخطوات الجراحيه الخاصه بالنابروتكنولوجي. دايجنوزس اليوتيل فيز ديفكت، الدايجنوزس فيه اب تو 98%، وفي المقابل ان مفيش تريتمنت هكذا بهذه النسبه في الكونفنشنال جينيكولوجي. وفي البوست بارتم ديبريشن ابلكيشن والبريماتوريتي، الحفاظ على الحمل ومخاطر اثناء الحمل وهكذا، والديتنج بريجننسي والكرونيك بيلفيك بين والكوست افكتفنس وتوفير النفقات. ودي كانت اخر سلايد معانا. وهعرض لكم فيديو صغنن قوي قد كده كان في سجلناه في أمريكا.
أنا سعيد جدا إن أكون جزء.
Me siento muy contenta.
Y yo me siento muy contento.
Muy contenta.
Inmensamente feliz
De ser parte. De poder ser parte.
De pertenecer.
De ser parte de la familia.
de la familia, a la gran familia,
A la gran familia.
de la gran familia, a esta familia
De Fertility Care.
Fertility Care,
Fertility Care.
De Fertility Care.
del Fertility Care, Fertility Care,
De Fertility Care.
de Fertility Care.
De la familia de Fertility Care.
To be part of Fertility Care family.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Doctor. Akid, we would have loved having you over at Université La Sagesse, maybe some other time. I will leave the floor for questions, but allow me to ask a question, since in this technique you encourage the natural ways, if I may say so. In the particular example you gave about PCOS and the surgical procedure that was done, would you, using NaProTECHNOLOGY, encourage before using surgery, since we have seen the case study you have shown about a woman having a BMI over 32, which is obesity, would you encourage 6 months, for example, of PCOS diet, because this also has shown scientifically a very high chances of conception. Of course, if the woman is willing to undergo this strict diet. سؤالي كان إذا بهيدا الحالة اللي فرجاها اللي هي obese women قبل ما ينعمل جراحة، هل ما انه نحن عم نحكي عن قصص ناتورال، هل بالنابروتكنولوجي او بالعيادات المختصه بتنصحوا المراه لخضاع للبي سي او اس دايت اللي هو كمان ساينتفكلي فرجى، مش بس لانه بينعمل ريدكشن بالويت ممكن يخفوا السيست والفوليوم تبع الاوفري، بس كمان بتعلى الفيرتيليتي والهرمونال ليفل مثل ما شفنا في مايلد اندروجين انكريس اتسترا.
ده سؤال مهم جدا. انا عايز اقول لحضرتك ان that's a good question. NaProTECHNOLOGY is not separate from other modalities of treatment. It's a holistic treatment. So we have a lifestyle medicine specialist that work cooperatively with Cairo, she's Dr. Amr AboAlyazid, and for the lifestyle modification. Lifestyle modification in the PCOS is mandatory, because loss of 10% of the weight of the female can result in many penalties for spontaneous regain of frequency of ovulation. But the holistic treatment should be done on every lines of treatment. We like give a chance for every line of treatment, and using the Creighton model only for monitoring of the fertility care with the lifestyle modification can raise the success rate of and in polycystic ovary syndrome, instead of using a lifestyle modification only as a single line of treatment. So this female had 3 successful pregnancies, natural, and the hormonal levels become drop to the quite normal levels, and the cyclicity of the menstrual cycle and the spontaneous rates were very high. So we use also lifestyle modification mandatory in our management. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. فإذا دكتور عمر عم بيقول استخدم يعني يعني سمح انه تغير اسلوب حياتها، طلب منها تغير اسلوب حياتها وتضعف حالها شوي، بس كمان دمج تغيير اسلوب الحياه مع النابروتيكنولوجي مع الجيران. في عندكم any question؟ Yes.
هو كان في سلايد، كان في كيس ثانيه عن current miscarriage والمانجمنت بتاع recurrent miscarriage، بس الوقت ما سمحش اللي احنا نقدر نشرحها لكم او مختلف الانواع. وعندنا برضو كيس برزنتيشنز عن الابلكيشن بتاع النابروتكنولوجي ونظام كريتون لرعايه الخصوبه في الكانسر patients. Fertility for cancer patients and early prediction of cancer, different cancers. And next time when maybe in Lebanon in person, we can present more cases about NaProTECHNOLOGY.
تفضلي معنا.
أنا بس بدي أسأل عن العملية اللي بيعملها، بشيل من الأوفر أو بشيل تمكيس؟
Dr. Amr, the question is when you do an ovarian wedge resection, بتشيل كم كيس ولا بتشيل من الأوفري؟
ده احنا قلنا ان الاوفريان في الاوفريان في البوليسيستيك اوفري حجم المبيض بيبقى تقريبا 3 أضعاف الحجم الطبيعي. ثانيا لو احنا لاحظنا ان مخزون البويضات او مخزون المبيض في المرضى بتوع تكيس المبايض او البوليسيستيك اوفري الاي ام اتش فيهم بيبقى much higher than normal. يعني احنا لقينا اللي هو 3 أضعاف الاي ام اتش او مخزون المبيض 3 أضعاف النورمال رينج، وبالتالي احنا بنشيل جزء صغير من منتصف المبيض اللي هو بيسمح لنا اللي احنا نرجع حجم المبيض للحجم الطبيعي مع الحفاظ على عدم وجود التصاقات والحفاظ على باقي المبيض اللي هو يكون حجمه طبيعي ووظائفه طبيعية. الوظائف بتاعته طبيعية. normal size and normal functions.
Thank you for this nice presentation. I would like to ask, what exactly is the NaProTECHNOLOGY? What do you use for premenstrual dysphoric disorder as a healthcare physician in comparison to current treatment antidepressants? As this table shows, it shows a 95.2% success rate as compared to the 43% success rate. So exactly what is the NaProTECHNOLOGY for this case?
دكتور قدرت تسمع السؤال بوضوح؟ الافكتفنس summary اللي بتفرجي انه
what is the NaProTECHNOLOGY for what exactly it is for PMS?
What do you do to treat PMS?
Do you use medications? Is it a technique?
When we do,
what is it?
Yeah, a very good question. And the premenstrual syndrome has a stepwise approach, and many women that has a PMS has a post-peak phase defect, a luteal phase defect. So NaProTECHNOLOGY and Santa Paul the Sixth Institute has a major study about using a progesterone support in the second half of the cycle to optimize the normal levels of the hormonal profile of the fertility cycle. Just to do that optimization of the hormonal levels, it will make a lot of. It's a progesterone support to the luteal phase, and there is like naloxone can be used also up to, it's like we have said that it's a stepwise approach up to the antidepressant, but we should give the chance for the progesterone support to optimize the hormonal levels in the PMS patients.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to take the rest of the answers and questions during the break, if it's possible. We wish Dr. was with us. We really thank you for Dr. Amr. We really thank you for your intervention, and we extend the invitation for the next time you are.
Thank you very much. You did a great job on those pronunciations. Massachusetts, that's a difficult one. I'm so glad to be with all of you. When I think of Lebanon, if I may, hopefully it's not too stereotypical, but I think when I think of Lebanese people, resiliency and seeking peace. So I'm so glad to be with you and share some thoughts with you about what's happening here in New York and in New England. This picture, by the way, is where I changed careers. I was going to be a marine biologist, and on this ship called the Westward, I decided to go into medicine. So I'm ready to share with you about serving and healing women and couples using this NaProTechnology that you've just heard about. Dr. Amir did a great job, and I'm going to be speaking more from a philosophical or an overview approach, and we'll dive into some of the research that we conducted when I was in Massachusetts and show how that's a little bit different here in New York. You'll get to see some of our specific treatments that we are using. So as your MC explained, that I'm trained in family medicine, but over these past 40 years, I've become more and more expertise in treating women's health conditions, whether it be infertility, pelvic pain, unusual bleeding, premenstrual tension syndrome, a whole variety of things, even sleep disorders that can vary with various phases of the menstrual cycle. So these things that I've mentioned just now are symptoms. They are not diagnoses. So infertility is not a diagnosis. Infertility is a symptom of many underlying diagnoses. An example of that is if you were short of breath and you were to go to the emergency department. You would not want to come out just with an oxygen tank. You would want to know what was the cause of my shortness of breath. If it's pneumonia, I need antibiotics. Is it a blood clot? Then I need heparin. Is it heart failure? Then I need Lasix. The treatment is different depending on the underlying condition that caused the symptom of shortness of breath. So when we focus on infertility, we see that there is a disorder which is interfering with either conceiving or sustaining the pregnancy. So our job in NaProTechnology, and what I like to call restorative reproductive medicine, is to figure out which is the underlying cause and study to fix that cause. What is the best way to fix that cause? On average here in New York, we find 4.5 reasons per couple for the infertility. There are approximately 80 different reasons for infertility, and on average, a couple that comes here has 4.5 underlying reasons. So we need to analyze, what are the reasons? Could it be blocked fallopian tubes? Well, that gets a lot of publicity, but it's only 15% of infertility couples have something to do with the fallopian tubes. And yet, the typical gynecologist in New York is going to schedule a hysterosalpingogram before they send them to the IVF center. A hysterosalpingogram to me is a little bit nerve-wracking because, number one, it's painful. I wouldn't want to have to go through it. And number two, it's radiation to the fallopian tube area to see the fluid coming through, the contrast coming through, but there's the ovary right there. So we're giving some radiation to the ovary. And I don't know about you, but when I go to the dentist, they put a shield to protect testicles and sperm and protect ovaries and eggs. So anyway, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but I'm saying if it's only 15% of people, maybe we need to be looking for more common things, such as this. Ovulation. Approximately 60% of the people in my clinic have ovulatory disorders. Many of them aren't even releasing the egg. They're having cycles. The gynecologist tells them, oh, you're ovulating, obviously, because you're having menstrual periods. Or I did a progesterone level and it was positive, it was above 4. Therefore, obviously you're ovulating. No, you have obviously had an ovulatory event such that you're now making progesterone, but it doesn't mean that you've necessarily released the egg. That's a big assumption. Another problem might be implantation. It is so common that people would have chronic endometritis. The lining of the uterus is inflamed. The most common reason for that, I believe, is endometriosis. And again, about 60% of the couples that come here have endometriosis. Maybe it's common here in the northeast of the United States. I'm not sure, but it's very, very common. Maybe it's less common in other parts of the world. And then, of course, there could be chromosomal issues. There could be age issues, hormonal support. Maybe the ovary is not making enough progesterone. That is very common here on Long Island. Maybe it's a lack of cervical mucus, especially people that have been on the birth control pill for more than a couple of years. Their cervix is not very good at making mucus. I will show you a slide about that in a minute. So the ovary function, very, very important. And thanks to studies from around the world, we know things that help the follicle to become more mature and more likely to become mature, such as melatonin. 3 milligrams of melatonin taken in the follicular phase of the ovary cycle. So it's going in a counterclockwise direction in this schematic. So we're going from antral follicles to a mature follicle, ovulation, and then the corpus luteum for 10 or 12 days. So as I started to say, melatonin helps this process to be better. Possibly NAC, something called inositol. These are things that we know can help this process to be better. And if we need to, some drugs back here in this phase, letrozole. You'll hear about Clomid in a second and why we don't use Clomid anymore. So, in summary of my introduction, the restorative approach to reproductive medicine is to diagnose and then work to restore. How can we restore if we don't know the diagnosis? And we provide excellent preconception care. Very, very important. It helps the whole success of the pregnancy by doing a very good job prior to conception. That leads to healthy pregnancies. We are working 1 embryo at a time, not hoping for 2 or 3 to increase our odds of success. No, 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 no. 1 embryo at a time. And we're working to reduce miscarriage. And very importantly, you'll see in my concluding slide, reducing prematurity. So the philosophy, the ethics that we take is to repair and to optimize function, as you heard Dr. Amir saying, and to protect each embryo. That last statement is to avoid a utilitarian approach where we'll say, oh, let's implant 3 embryos and hope that 1 takes. That's utilitarianism. Each person is very precious. And IVF, as you'll see in the next slide, loses 7 embryos for every 1 that's born. Here's the study from 2001, United States, putting together all of the data from the ART centers, Assisted Reproductive Technology Centers. And when you look at all of the embryos that were transferred and the number of babies that were born, just counting the transferred embryos, not counting the ones that were left in the petri dish or discarded or frozen for later, just counting the ones that were transferred, they are losing 6.7 embryos for every person that's born. So that's where I use the word utilitarian. We're not supposed to use people. We might use a microwave oven, we might use a car, we might use an airplane, but we don't use people. So NaProTECHNOLOGY, thanks to the St. Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska, was the first to develop a comprehensive model of restorative reproductive medicine. Here in New York, it's taken off like wildfire. So many people have been asking the question, why can't I achieve a pregnancy? And they go to the gynecologist, and the gynecologist says, well, let's do a hysterosalpingogram. And then they go to the IVF center, and the IVF center says, okay, we're going to use these drugs and do this and that, and so on. And they say it's like an assembly line. They say, I feel, these are their quotes, I feel like a number. But instead, when they hear about what the Gianna Center offers, they're coming here. This graphic is just sort of a schematic representation of what happened here when we started 7 years ago. There was a good cadre of people that were waiting and interested. But as the word of mouth has spread, we haven't done any advertising hardly at all. The word of mouth, we are very, very busy now to the tune of 14 hours a day. So this vision, this view is catching on, is very popular. This is Zion National Park in Utah. That's my son, Peter, who's now a lawyer. We are 1,500 feet above the ground there. Wonderful experience if you have the chance. People say, I want to come to the United States. I want to go to New York and Chicago. I say, yikes, go to Zion and go to Yosemite. So now we'll move into this world of infertility. And Marise can interrupt me anytime. I can jump right to my summary slides. But as you see, infertility is very common. And this is a little joke to say, you know, why are people so interested in IVF? So in the United States, at least, they have this promotion, hungry, think Snickers bar. So you can say that around here, say hungry, and people think Snickers bar. Well, the IVF world has, and the media has caught people's interest in infertility, think IVF. So they're bypassing the underlying causes of infertility. So here's an example of a woman who's charting with the Creighton Model System. And you see the first cycle up above and her days of bleeding and days of observations, and there's no mucus observed in the first cycle. In the second cycle, no mucus. She quit charting for a couple months. She's back. She's still no mucus. Still no mucus. And then here, in the small writing, she starts vitamin B6. And she has 1 day of cervical mucus. And thanks to her teachers, she identifies that, and there's intercourse on that day. And about 5 weeks later, here's an ultrasound picture of her fetus. So vitamin B6 is a lot less expensive than IVF, and it solved the underlying problem. How about low sperm counts? Well, I went to a special conference in Boston on low sperm counts. It was a urologist, and he talked about all kinds of surgical techniques and so on and so forth. At the end of his conference, I almost fell over. He said, but having heard all of this technology, the most important thing that you can do for low sperm counts is to improve the woman's cervical mucus. And here's an example. This, where the X is, that was man having his semen analysis accomplished, and his count was only 700,000. The motility was only 30%. This is not the Kruger morphology. This is just how's the sperm look. 82% appeared normal. There were some white blood cells. And when you put this all together, you can get what's called an effective sperm count of only 189,000. And yet, in that very cycle, he and she had intercourse on the peak day, and they achieved a pregnancy test, a positive pregnancy test, and they had a healthy baby. So such a low sperm count with the fertility care system. There's a study out of Germany and a study recently out of Italy that showed charting your cycles is more effective than IVF in achieving live birth. Not just with low sperm counts, with any reason. Polycystic ovary, you just heard some presentations about this. How does NaProTECHNOLOGY help that? Well, we figure out why does somebody get polycystic ovary, and we fix that underlying reason. So here's a neat study that was done in 1981. Johns Hopkins University and their ability to do wedge resections was the best in the country at achieving pregnancies in polycystic ovary people. Well, then Dr. Hildreth did his work and all of the things that helped the ovary to work better, and they were much faster at achieving pregnancies at a much higher rate. This is a slide that I promised you about cervical mucus and the birth control pill. So bear with me for a quick second. Here is the day of ovulation. 0 is the day of ovulation. So -1 is 1 day before ovulation, 2 days before, and so on. And then your different lines here, those are women of different ages. So the top line is age 13 to 17. So let's call that the average 15-year-old. And this is work by Dr. Odeblad in Sweden. And so what he found was that the average 15-year-old was making very good mucus. And what is very good mucus? A spin Barkite above 7, okay? So you see above 7 happened about 6 days before her ovulation. Whereas the average 25-year-old, maybe 4 days before ovulation, she meets a level of 7. And then the average 35-year-old, maybe only 2.5 days before ovulation. So this is the natural aging process, limiting our days of fertility. Now I'm going to take this 25-year-old curve and I'm going to bring it to the next slide. So here's that 25-year-old curve. And here's somebody who has been on the birth control pill. Let's just call it a year. And here's 1 month after stopping. She doesn't even reach 5 for the quality of her mucus. Even 18 months after coming off of the birth control pill, maybe she's reaching 7 just for a day or 2 prior to ovulation. So when I was in Massachusetts, I was very busy helping these people that couldn't achieve a pregnancy after the birth control pill. I was helping them to make better mucus. And we have many ways to help with that. So let me share with you some data from New England. Okay, I just checked my time. Okay, so many things that we offered them. Yes, basics, a good night's sleep, very important. Avoiding certain chemical exposures. Unfortunately, many of the rivers in the United States are polluted with birth control pills, and that works into the groundwater, into people's water, or into the river, into the reservoirs, into people's water. So this is a concern. I might be one of the only people talking about it, but it's a concern of mine. And so many people will use a reverse osmosis filter to remove some of these chemicals. Treatment, medications to help cervical mucus. 81% of our patients benefited from some of those, or we applied that information, things like vitamin B6 and guaifenesin and other things. NAC is very good for the cervical mucus. And we use some ovulation drugs. Now, this is back in the 1990s and 2000s. And we were using Clomid 30% of the people that needed an ovulation drug. So of those 62%, 30% of them received Clomid and 48% received letrozole. We also use things like metformin in those people that had glucose issues, or I should say insulin resistance, and maybe polycystic ovary, and then supporting the luteal phase. But if we jump forward now to my work in New York, we're not using Clomid anymore. There's a great Harvard conference that happens every year on infertility at Harvard University. They said we are past the Clomid era. They say, doctors, we are past the Clomid era. No one should be using Clomid anymore. It thins the lining of the uterus. It dries up cervical mucus. It could have triplets or quadruplets. Whereas letrozole, guided correctly, may be monitored with ultrasound, can generate 1 mature follicle at a time. So other medicines that we use, low-dose naltrexone, you could read about that. There's a website called ldnscience.org. Take a look at that. Thyroid, Dr. Hildreth always teaches us, think thyroid. Helping the implantation to be successful using an anti-inflammatory. Other women needed antidepressants. Other women were taking lots of histamines, antihistamines would dry up the mucus, and so on. Jump forward here to New York, and I'm not using piroxicam anymore. I'm now using things like pycnogenol and doxycycline. That could be a whole lecture in itself. The pycnogenol is a natural substance, and doxycycline is probably working more as an anti-inflammatory medicine than an antibiotic. It's very good for the lining of the uterus in those people that need it. Vitamins and supplements, most important, vitamin D3 and magnesium. Folic acid, of course. Iron, yes, Harvard proved that iron helps the ovaries work better. The ovaries need iodine. It's not just the thyroid that needs iodine, the ovaries need iodine. And surgical treatment, yes, 48% of our women needed surgical interventions. That's a lot. So I want to show you just quickly a couple statistics. The difference between age less than 35 and greater than or equal to 35. Over here, adjusted live births. So if you were younger, you had a higher success rate than if you were older. Shouldn't be a surprise, but our studies bared that out. And then the body mass index, less than 25, greater than 25. Adjusted live birth rate, 40% versus 16%. Huge, almost a threefold difference if a woman's BMI is down in that range between 20 and 25. Some of my hardest patients to treat, though, are the ones with a BMI of 18 or less. So here's the influence of BMI on success rate. Also, I mentioned the studies in Italy and Germany showing that just Creighton model itself helps achieve pregnancy more successfully than IVF. And this study comes from Toronto. So there's a third study out there that shows it. Here's some of the differences in diagnoses of the people that came to our center. We asked them, what did your infertility doctor say was the problem? And so we have listed what they were told was the problem. 23% of them unexplained. In our studies in New England, we had only 1% unexplained. In Canada, another study done in Toronto, 1% unexplained. Male factor, they said only 10%. We found 30%. Endometriosis, they said only 14% of people had endometriosis. We found 74% in our study had endometriosis. Blocked fallopian tubes, we actually found more than they found. And so on. Polycystic ovary, unidentified in their work. And then there's another one here, vitamin D deficiency. They weren't even looking. We found 14% of our patients had vitamin D deficiency, and that affects ovary function. Limited cervical mucus, look at the difference there. P-value, oh my goodness. So this is what I say is excellent preconception care, figuring out what needs to be optimized. So Marise, I'm ready to summarize. And this slide maybe is a little bit busy, but it's to prove a point. In New England, my success rate at live birth was only 29%. That's still better than an IVF process, but I was a little bit disappointed. But in New England, I did not have access to women getting a follicular ultrasound series. So I was naturally held back from pushing the ovary with things like letrozole, because it would be the worst press in the world to have a quadruplet pregnancy and people talking about selective reduction and things like that. So I was sort of held back. Here in New York, completely different story. We have an imaging center in almost every town that is organized to understand what we need the ultrasonographer to find. And so here, our live birth rate is approaching 60%, quite a difference. And so that can be summarized here. Without ultrasound series, we're kind of hampered. With the access to a follicular ultrasound series, checking an ultrasound like cycle day 10, 11, 12, and seeing if the follicle is able to be mature. And if so, I don't need letrozole. If it's not able to be mature, I give letrozole. Also, I want to see, does it rupture correctly? If it doesn't, I need to give them something like Ovidrel, which is HCG injection. This we spoke about, age under 35 and BMI under 25, much more success. In the meanwhile, we had only 2 sets of twins in the 25 years of this study that was done in New England. So our study adds to the growing literature showing that restorative reproductive medicine is a wise approach to infertility. It suggests that the restorative reproductive medicine can be done in a primary care setting. I'm a family physician. And supports that the treatment results in healthy births. I'm going to show you that in a second. Here it is. Our prematurity rate, high risk for prematurity, infertility couples are at high risk. Our prematurity was 8% in this 25-year study. Whereas in Massachusetts, where we were, the state average was 8.6%. Average population. So we brought a high risk population, chance of prematurity below the average risk because of very good preconception care. The things that lead to infertility are also the things that lead to prematurity in many situations. IVF, the next line, bypasses that. It doesn't pay much attention to these things. Their prematurity rate in Massachusetts, just limiting to the singleton pregnancies, not the twins and triplets, just the singleton pregnancies, they had a prematurity rate of 31%. The same state, the same obstetrical care, 31%. The IUIs, intrauterine insemination, had 16%, still double what ours was. And so our rate at 8% was almost 1/4 of the IVF rate. So this supports the concept that restorative reproductive medicine can result in better maternal health and better newborn outcomes. And my last slide. This is very important. In the United States, we got insurance companies. In other countries, you're dealing with government health care, things like that. No matter who you're talking to, they want to increase value, the value of the dollar and the success rate of the outcome. So what we see with restorative reproductive medicine is that value is added with a healthy pregnancy, fewer complications, less admissions to the hospital, and a healthy neonate, less newborn complications and less prematurity. So this is equation here in these bubbles. This is, I worked in the insurance industry for a while, and they talk about this equation, that if we can improve the quality and lower the cost, because the quality divided by cost equals value, and insurance companies want to have value for their premiums. And if you're paying your premium dollars to this care, you want to have better value for that. So these are some of the references. It will be there on your screen. Dr. Stanford, oh my gosh, a brilliant guy in Utah, does a lot of research on these topics. And so the difference here is that it's oriented to long-term health and success and a healing approach. Here's some websites for you to mark down. So I will stop there. I thank you for your attention, and it's good to be with you.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Carpentier, for your presentation, which is beyond value. And now it's time for questions and answers. Who would like to yes?
And just so you know, we have 3 NaProTechnology medical consultants with us. Dr. Amr is still with us, and Dr. Sophie also is with us. So feel free to ask any one of them.
Thank you, Doctor, for this really excellent presentation. I'm also a family physician, and thank you for showing us that NaProTechnology is not a foreigner to medicine, but it rather sheds light on maybe because we are underdiagnosing or not looking for the causes for medical problems. However, I would like to ask you, are you backed up with evidence regarding the treatments you are suggesting? You know, with the lawsuits that are being done against physicians regarding surgical procedures, regarding giving medications. Do we have really evidence-based research regarding these issues? For example, am I medically backed up with evidence if I have a patient who is infertile to give her vitamin B6 or melatonin or something like this? Am I backed up, or will I face a lawsuit if it doesn't work? Thank you.
Okay, great. So the evidence is growing, and much of the evidence comes from research around the world, not necessarily the United States. The United States is enthralled with the IVF movement, and so we have to look elsewhere oftentimes. But the National Institutes of Health here has shown vitamin D3. Oh my goodness. A man who has a low sperm count, if he takes vitamin D3, he is 3 times more likely to achieve a pregnancy. We have research, tons of research on metformin, and even continuing metformin into pregnancy to reduce complications, not just gestational diabetes, but possibly also the chance of miscarriage and even possibly reducing the chance of preeclampsia. That one's being debated. The Harvard University study or the Harvard University Infertility Conference, I try to go every other year. It is excellent. People from around the world gathering to hear the latest research that's happening. For instance, from Columbia University in New York City, they found that the best treatment for chronic endometritis is doxycycline. Over my career, that has been a question for 30 years of what is the best treatment for doxycycline. They tried all kinds of combinations of antibiotics, even intravenous antibiotics, and they couldn't come up with a satisfactory answer until Columbia and a study in Italy showed that doxycycline is very helpful. Doxycycline turns out to be a molecule that I think of it as a figure of 8. It kills germs with this side and it's anti-inflammatory with this side. Very, very successful and proven by endometrial biopsies. And the list goes on and on and on. And so we're trying to gather this information together, but the IVF industry is very powerful with money. And we are busy in practice, as I said, 14 hours a day trying to publish this stuff. And so Dr. Joseph Stanford and the International Institute for Restorative Reproductive Medicine is trying to have doctors like me that are scattered around the world submit their cases, submit their data, not just individual cases, but data to this program that's going to be called STORM, STORRM. The RRM is Restorative Reproductive Medicine. Just like in the United States, the IVF centers have to report to the federal authorities.
What about the guidelines from the ACOG? Why don't we have new guidelines integrating these updates? Why aren't they being used? And what about medical students and residency programs? It's very important, you know, in medical school and residency programs, we encourage our young physicians to really have a holistic approach to their medical cases. How can we integrate NaProTechnology into residency programs and integrating it in medicine rather than having it as a single entity to just attend lectures regarding that?
Yes, this is excellent question. I feel like I don't want to, when I die, I don't want it to all disappear kind of thing. It's not just on me, of course, but when we die, we don't want it to disappear. We want the medical students to be exposed to that, right? So there's a group called FACTS, F-A-C-T-S, FACTS. You should look this up, sharing the information about fertility care in medical school. They started by interviewing medical students, and they said, how many of you would be comfortable teaching somebody about natural family planning or restorative reproductive medicine if it was your patient? How many would you be comfortable? And only about 5% were comfortable. And then they said, how many of you, understanding what it is now, think your patients should have access to this? And 85%. So they said there's a big knowledge gap in the medical schools. Only 5% feel comfortable and 85% think it's important. So FACTS is trying to get into the medical schools and teach them. It's evidence-based information. It's available out there, okay? But we just got to bring it into the medical schools in an evidence-based fashion. So good question.
Any other question? Right. Allow me to thank you, Dr. Carpentier.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc.
Yes, now.
Thank you, Doctor. Just I was just thinking about also bringing that for the nurses also, because we are at the Faculty of Public Health at Sagesse University. Also, we have a Department of Nursing Sciences. So it's very important what you have teach us today to bring it also for our nurses, because our nurses are also, we teach them to be health educators and to play a leadership role in the society. So not just in the hospitals, so also in the community also. So thank you for this conference. And we hope that we will have material that we can introduce in our lectures with our students. Thank you.
You're welcome. Nurses are very, very important in both directions, okay? They can help promote this information, but also my patients complain over and over that the nurses that they met in the gynecologist's office were poo-pooing this. They were just saying, go to IVF. What are you bothering with vitamin D? Why are you bothering to take metformin? Just go to IVF. So you're right. The nurses are very important. The patients would attest to that. So thank you for bringing that up. I love to teach nurses and nurse practitioners. Very, very important information.
They can play a crucial role in that.
Dr. Carpentier, we have nurses and we have also midwives. So I would like to ask also, what can the midwives do that maybe the nurses can do, or the gynecologist or family physicians cannot do?
So the midwives are much more attuned to the woman's body and her physiology. That's fantastic. It's almost like the medical students get sort of caught up in the pharmaceutical industry or the pharmaceutical applications and options. So I love it when my patient says, I'm going to go see a midwife after we've achieved a pregnancy. I just love that. I say, you'll be very content there. They will listen to your questions, will try to explain the best they can. But the midwives also are going to be caught up with miscarriages, potentially premature birth, or potentially cervical shortening and things like this. So they tend to be, the midwives in general tend to be more attuned to the value of progesterone support. Progesterone is known to be prevent uterine contractions and the shortening of the cervix. So progesterone, if you have a low progesterone level, you're going to be in more trouble. I find that the midwives have really a chance, an opportunity to help intervene for these patients.
Thank you. Actually, I'm glad that we are here today. It's true that we are 30 people only, but this is a group representing a multidisciplinary healthcare professional, because we have medical students, we have physicians, we have midwives, nurses, and other professions in the healthcare. Because I think in the 21st century, we are at a point where we need a holistic approach. We need patient-centered care, which is based, of course, which is evidence-based. We should not use the Band-Aid techniques, as Dr. Amr said. So it's true that maybe this is a long afternoon after a long day at work, but I think this is a very good opportunity to think twice before we give medication just as a Band-Aid. And plus, when you talk about vitamin D3, originally I'm a cell and molecular biologist, I'm a researcher, and I've always looked at vitamin D3 as a hormone, not as a vitamin, because I know exactly how it goes into the nucleus, how it affects your hormone. So this is not a joke. This is a hormone. This is not a random vitamin. So people should have critical thinking, starting medical school, nursing school, midwife school, until they practice medicine and treatment. So this is a very good opportunity for me to thank this multidisciplinary team, to thank Dr. Amr, to thank you, Dr. Carpentier, to thank also Marise and Mrs. Slaibi, because actually Marise has a flight tonight. So, and she insisted on being here today with us. So I really hope that this NaProTECHNOLOGY won't be like an electron which is completely out of the medical treatment, because I've seen it as something which should be included in a holistic approach, in an evidence-based, patient-centered approach. So thank you very much, and I hope that we will meet soon. Thank you.
Since we recorded all of that, we will be sharing it with you, and we would really appreciate you sharing it with others so we can spread the word. And we will let you know about the training that we're having in November for practitioners in Lebanon. We're coming from the States, faculty and hopefully medical consultant, to teach in Lebanon so that people can start learning in person. Now I teach, I have even a few clients here that I teach them, but once I head back to the States, I'll be teaching virtually. But God willing, starting November, we will have a few ladies teaching on the ground in Lebanon. And we have with us Dr. Slaibi, who's finishing his application to become a NaProTECHNOLOGY medical consultant here in Lebanon, in Zahri and Dar al-Ahmar. And we have already another doctor, I'm not going to mention his name, who already completed the application and applied to the institute. So thank God we're on a good path to really bring Creighton Model and NaProTECHNOLOGY to Lebanon. Yes, and I want to just thank also Dr. Sophie Saab, who's been really instrumental in helping us to bring the Creighton to Lebanon. And she was one of our presenters at the webinars we did in March and April. And hopefully in the future, we can have her and Dr. Amr and maybe Dr. Carpentier also in person for conference for medical professionals, so we can raise awareness of this technology and the Creighton Model system. So thank you for your support. Thank you so much.